Okay, moving on to the next topic, that is higher order thinking skills, or HOTS as it is sometimes referred to. So let's see what exactly HOTS means. It is an education reform that is emerged out of the learning taxonomies that have been given by a lot of people. But the most important one on which most of our work is based is on Bloom's taxonomy. I will be coming to what exactly Bloom's has said about it. So what do we understand by HOTS, or higher order thinking skills? Basically, it means that the person has the ability for critical thinking that is different from the lower order thinking learning skills, which is just the understanding and the remembering of the material, or what we refer to as rote learning. And as differentiated from that lower order thinking, we have the higher order thinking, which includes synthesizing, analyzing, reasoning, comprehending, applying, and evaluating. So these are all the various components which are there of higher order thinking skills. That is, the person is not only able to understand and analyze what the person is learning, but is also able to use that information in different situations. Naturally, the person's higher order thinking skills will definitely affect the thinking person, the effectiveness as far as the learning is concerned. Naturally, the person who has higher level of thinking would be able to understand and assimilate information much faster than a person who is not able to do that. So naturally, a student who has grown up with that ability to, who has been encouraged to think, will show better understanding in the class as compared to those students who have not. So HOTS means that the person is able to think and not just memorize the information that is being imparted to them. The two important components of higher order thinking are critical thinking and problem solving, which are obviously linked, because only the person who is able to think about an information critically is able to analyze it, assimilate it, and recognize how it can be applied in other situations, will be able to do much better at problem solving also. So these skills are very, very valuable, and transference of information to new situations, creative thinking, that is being able to create something which is totally new out of the information that has been given to them. These are all the components of higher order thinking skills. So if we look at HOTS, what does it stand for? Higher order thinking. So what are we doing here? The higher order thinking skills are the skills we use when we think on a higher level, and we are not just repeating whatever has been given to us in the class like a robot. This, as I was referring to you, has been given to us by Benjamin Bloom as far back as in 1956. He wrote a book which was called Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, the classification of educational goals. Here he has talked about the higher and the lower order of thinking skills, and he says that the aim of higher education should be that you help the student to learn how to analyze and evaluate the information that is being given to them, and not just learn it up, mug it up, and reproduce it in the exams. So they should be able to look at the information in a critical way, evaluate it, and also see how and where it can be applied. So if we look at this diagram, which tells us about Bloom's taxonomy, you can see remember is at the bottommost rung. That is recalling facts and basic concepts. This is the absolute basic thing that is supposed to be done as far as thinking and analyzing is concerned. So the next step is to understand, that is, whatever has been given in the class, whatever the teacher has taught in the class, the student is able to understand that. That is, he is able to describe it, he is able to explain it. So in junior classes, we have questions like explain the water cycle, or locate on this map where Delhi is situated. So these are the lower order thinking skills, that is the remembering of a particular material and giving an explanation, or sorry, understanding that material that has been given to you. From here, we start with the higher order thinking skills, that is understanding the application of that information in new situations. What exactly does that information mean and how it can be applied? Analyzing that information, that is draw connection between different material that has been given to the situation. Evaluate the information that has come, whether it is something that will be beneficial in this particular situation or not. And finally, at the apex, you can see that the most important aspect of critical thinking is to be able to create something. That is, creativity on the part of the student would be considered to be the highest form of thinking skill. So as we can see over here, the 6 levels are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So remembering and understanding form part of the lower order of thinking skills. Applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating are of the higher order. And yes, definitely we do need the higher order thinking skills, but it's important to remember that we can't do away with the first two either. So unless the first two levels are crossed, we cannot reach the third level. So it's not as if lower order of thinking skills have to be done away with. We can't do that if we have to build on the skills to formulate the higher order thinking skills. So it's only after the student has understood the information and remembered it that he can move on to applying it or analyzing it or evaluating it. So that's exactly what I was saying, that these lower order thinking skills, as we refer to them, are actually prerequisites for the higher order thinking skill. Without the lower order thinking skills, we will not be able to reach the higher order thinking skills. So this is not something to be looked down upon. Lower order thinking skills are equally important, because without these lower order thinking skills, we cannot move to the higher order. So anyways, it is important that when the student comes to our institute in the college, they usually start with the lower order thinking skills, because that is what they have done in the school. They have seen that remembering and understanding has worked well for them in school. So naturally, they think that even here it will work the same, and they will benefit by just the basic tools of thinking. As teachers, it is our responsibility that we take them from the lower order thinking skills to the higher order thinking skills. It is important for the student to know that now that they have come into a higher institute, a higher education level, they also have to move from the lower order thinking skills to the higher order thinking skills. That is, they have to learn to apply the information that they have. They have to be able to analyze that information, evaluate that information, and hopefully create something new out of it. So then the most important aspect of HOTS is critical thinking. What does critical thinking mean? That you are able to look at the situation and understand what is the requirement of this particular situation. So you have a problem, you think about how that problem is going to be resolved, and then you find a solution. But our critical thinking doesn't end at finding a solution, because here also we have to think whether the solution which we have found is applicable, not applicable. Is this the best solution in this particular situation, or something else could have been done? So when we decide to define critical thinking, we talk about active process of analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, reflecting, and applying information in specific situations and contexts. So how is that information applicable in this particular concept is an important component of critical thinking. One very important component, another important component is active process, the active process of analyzing. So if the student is just sitting in the class and listening to what we are delivering to them, whether it is a lecture or a presentation or a video, if we are showing to the student and the student is just looking at it, that is not critical thinking. So basically the student needs to be actively involved in trying to assimilate the information that is being imparted. Only then we will say that the person is moving on to the higher order thinking skills. So what are the different components of critical thinking skills? We have reasoning, we have evaluating, we evaluate the particular situation, we resolve or try to find a solution to the problem. Out of the different problems that solutions that we have found, then we make a decision, okay, out of these 5 solutions or 3 or 2, which one would be the best in this particular situation. We make that decision and then we go on to analyze whether that's the decision that we had made was correct or not. And then during that analysis, we are also using reasoning. So, and if the solution is the right one, great. Otherwise, we try to look at a different way of dealing with it. It's very important that when we are imparting information, that we give depth of knowledge rather than just skimming over a large number of topics and giving little bit of information about everything, which is also important at certain stages, but it is equally important that the student understands the depth of that information. So the student needs to move from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. That is from recall and reproduction to other basic skills, strategic thinking and reasoning, and finally extended thinking. That is moving out of or being able to think what we refer to very commonly as being able to think out of the box, the different kind of a solution to a situation which is giving this person a problem. So looking at the strategies, let's see what are the different strategies which we can include in our teaching that will help the students develop the higher order thinking skills. We all teach concepts. I think all of us teach concepts when we are there in the classroom. There are, however, the students are many times not able to link those concepts to other concepts that they may have learned. We give them a lot of information about the concept, that is what is that concept, what is it called, what are the features which are part of the concept, the inclusive feature and those features which do not form part of that concept. Then we give them a lot of examples also and tell them how to understand that. But we many times we sort of don't give the students the links with the other the same concept in other subjects. For example, in psychology, we have different papers. We have abnormal psychology or understanding psychological disorders. We have developmental psychology. We have counseling. We have social psychology. And they, for the student, they become like watertight compartments. They are unable to understand that one concept that they have learned in one paper is also linked somehow to the new concept or this concept that they are learning in a different paper. So it becomes our responsibility to give those students that link, that okay, this is something which you have when you see the developmental aspects of the child and you see that there are certain aspects which are hindering the child's developmental process, that leads to the disorders at a later stage. So those kind of links, if we are able to make for the student, it helps the student to understand and conceptualize that all these different aspects are linked together, and formally actually they all form part of the same thing, but we are teaching them as part of different papers. So we need to give them links to related concepts, and also how these related concepts are also linked together, make these connections with more examples to them. And when we do that number of times in the class, the students also get the hang of it and they also start doing it themselves, linking the concepts from different areas and bringing them all together. Another way of developing HOTS in students is collaborative strategic reading. If you remember, when we were talking about the rotation of stations, we had said one of the stations was of collaborative work. That is where the students were working together and making a kind of a project amongst themselves. So that was different from the teacher guided section and the computer related work. The third section was of collaborative work. So here, how does it become a strategy for developing higher thinking? That is, you give them a task which sort of has 4 components. That is, preview the material, identify the clicks and the clunks, get the gist of the entire material, wrap up and summarize. And this can be done by different students taking on different roles. One can take on the role of the leader who will guide the entire group as to what is the activity and how we are going to go about it. The taskmaster sort of makes sure that everybody gives their own contribution in the group. The gist expert is the one who summarizes in the end, etc. So these roles can be taken up by the different students, and together they formulate a kind of a project related to that particular concept. So you can understand how much of information will have been brought about in this group project. The other strategies are explain HOTS to the students, tell them what HOTS mean, higher order thinking skills, what is it, how we can be developing these skills, and how it will benefit them to develop these skills. Encourage problem solving. The more problems that you give to the student to give to and ask them to give creative problems for it, not something which they can directly give from the lesson or directly give from the net. So that will definitely encourage their problem solving skills. Encourage questioning. Allow the students to ask questions, use graphic organizers and mind maps. Mind maps are very effective ways of giving the concepts to the student. Encourage creative thinking. Creative thinking is something the students come up with such amazingly creative things at times that when you give them that opportunity to come up with some creative thinking, they can do wonderful things. And sometimes you yourself has taken aback that you probably didn't look at this situation from this particular perspective that the student has brought in. Teach students to elaborate their answers in meaningful way. Meaningful way is the important aspect here. So it's not that I know only one paragraph, I learned only one paragraph and I came and I write 4 pages on that. That is not meaningful. But yes, if I know 6 points, I should be able to elaborate those 6 points in the way to be able to explain them, so that the person who's reading the material that I have presented should be able to understand that, yes, I know what I'm talking about. Another very important aspect is teach QAR, that is a question-answer relationship. I think all of us as teachers have been through this experience that the question is something and the student's answer is totally unrelated, or the student has written everything he or she knew about that particular topic which was being asked in the question. It's very important for us to help the students to understand what the question is asking and what the answer needs to be. Sometimes the material they have given is the right material, but it is not related to the question that has been asked. Teach Socratic style of questioning. I think Socrates was one of the greatest thinkers of our times, and his questions were all based on open-ended questions like how, why, when. So these kind of questions, if the student is able to ask, it will help the student also to understand. And if we use these questions, open-ended questions in the class, the students will be able to assimilate the information and give it in a more meaningful manner. And of course, it goes without saying, and I reiterate it here as well, that our own information about digital resources has to be updated so that we are able to give to the students links or sites from where they can get further material on the information that we are discussing or the topic under discussion. So in summary, again, if we talk about what are higher order thinking skills, we can see that they are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Though we refer to remembering and understanding as a lower order thinking skills, but also we need to remember that without these, we cannot move further. That is, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating will come only after remembering and understanding. So with that, I will come to the last part. Thank you so much. And I will come with the other two topics in a short while.